candidate in Holborn and St Pancras. And based on our general election manifesto then, which was our first fully costed manifesto, that included, among other things, 0 tuition fees. And it said that multinational companies and rich individuals must be made to pay their taxes. Now, when I said that in 2010, particularly when I said it to journalists, I used to get a very particular reaction. It's the kind of reaction that the plumber has when he looks at your boiler and sucks in his teeth. And the words that the journalists were saying then was, well, that's a bit politically radical. You can't say multinational companies and rich individuals have to pay their taxes, you know. The British electorate will never go for that. And it's actually a measure of progress of how much our kind of politics has made progress. And I'm going to credit particularly UK Uncut here. That we now have David Cameron standing up and actually saying multinational companies and rich individuals must pay their taxes. Exactly. Saying it. You may have noticed I said saying it. Of course, he's not actually doing anything about it. In fact, he's changed the law in some very specific ways that actually makes it much easier for multinational companies to avoid paying their taxes. But the public debate has moved significantly on this issue. And I think the Green Party, as part of a whole broader movement, has had some part in making that move. And I have a very simple answer when journalists say, oh, well, you know, David Cameron's saying that too. It's great. Well, the next thing for David Cameron to do is to go to Caroline Lucas's private members bill, the Tax and Financial Transparency Bill of 2011. And that set out a complete program. It was basically drawn up by the Tax Justice Network, let's give them credit. Richard Murphy, very good bloke on all of this stuff. And that has a whole set of measures of what could make some really significant moves towards making particularly multinational companies pay their taxes. And we've set the model out there. We can say to David Cameron, and we do say to David Cameron, implement this. And one of the key aspects of that, I'm not going to go through the whole detail of it, one of the key aspects of this is to say that any company that's trading in Britain, if it wants to trade in Britain, part of the conditions of that are you have to declare every other country in the world where you trade, what your turnover is there, what your profits are there, and what your staff numbers are there. And what that would actually do is create a situation whereby if you find there's an office in Switzerland that employs 2 men and an office dog, and somehow collects 20% of your global worldwide profits, it's going to be there and visible and obvious, and you can start to do something about it. So, at one end of what the work we're doing on inequality is tackling the fact that the wealthy have to pay their taxes. Now, in our 2010 General Election Manifesto, what we said then was that the 50p tax rate should start at earnings over £100,000. Of course, what's just happened is that the Tories have dropped that rate from 50p to 45p at £150,000. So that's what we said in 2010. I think the manifesto we're going to take into the next election will have a higher tax rate and probably a sliding higher tax rate at higher levels, but we've still got to do the maths on that. So that's at the top end, is basically making the wealthy are making their profits, their earnings out of our society. They've got to give back a fair share. They didn't make it from their own efforts. No one makes money by sitting in a room and dreaming up an idea. Maybe they'll then sell it to people, they'll have a whole society out there that supports them and makes it possible to sell it. But the profits come from the whole society, they're not from that individual brain. At the other end of things, I made some reference to this earlier about making the minimum wage a living wage. We absolutely must live, there is no reason why you should work full-time and not earn enough money to live on. You should not have to rely on benefits when you're working full-time. And another area that I do a lot of work on, and it's a huge and growing area, is 0 hours contracts. 0 hours contracts should be banned. And we've got to deal with the basic forced casualisation of the workforce, particularly the young workforce. 1 in 10 British workers is now working fewer hours than they'd like to. Now, part-time work is great if if it suits you. If if you want to combine it with caring responsibilities or hobbies or your life or whatever. But 1 in 10 workers is being forced to work less hours than they want to. And lots of employers are taking on 2 people at 16 hours rather than 1 full-time person, or even less. And so, we've got to structure the whole workforce so you have jobs you can build a life on. So in terms of tackling inequality, it's at the top, making the rich pay their taxes and things like land value tax. And at the bottom, it's making sure that we have decent wages, and also, of course, the other important area is decent benefits. Caroline was absolutely led in opposing the utterly misnamed benefits uprating bill, which actually meant that people on benefits most benefits are going to see them rise significantly, very possibly very significantly less than inflation for the next 3 years. So, taxes, decent wages, decent benefits. In short, I could go on for a very long time.